Ho'an means welcome in my language. My name is Eriel Deranger, and I'm a member of the Athabasca Chippewan First Nation, which is a Treaty 8 nation from so-called Canada. We are Dene or Dene Sotlene people, and my community is in Arctic Zone A, so it is very nice here. So I want to thank the Ohlone people for having such beautiful lands and territories that are nice and warm, and for allowing us to have this incredible discussion here today. So today's discussion will be talking about Indigenous regenerative land management, and California Indian leaders will share success stories of collaboration implementing traditional values and practices to restore land, water, and territories, including the revitalization of fire management, plant knowledge, and regenerative harvesting. Panelists will share practical guidance on forming innovation partnerships, setting mutually beneficial goals, and maintaining long-term effective relationships. I think that this is such an incredibly important conversation, because as we are in this race to find the solutions to the climate crisis, we sometimes we think of this as simply talking about how we reduce our emissions and how we transition our energy systems. But we also have to remember what it means to work in partnership and relationships with the land to restore those lands and territories for future generations as well. Today we have a powerhouse of panelists, again, all from California. So thank California for breeding some incredibly powerful Indigenous leaders. But today's panel is going to have this incredible powerhouse. We're going to have Conrad, who's Karuk from Northern California. We have Ali Menders Knight, who has a cheerleading team in the background over there, who is, oh my God, if I just lost, Mechoopda. We also have Elizabeth Paige, who is Desert Cahuilla. Oh my God, you can tell I'm from the north. As well as I've already lost Jordan Reyes, who is Lake Miwok and Kutsa? Kutsa. And because I butchered their introductions, I do want to give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves and some of the work that they do before we get into this beautiful discussion. So I'll pass it.
All right. Hey, Tunani. I just want to first acknowledge that I'm on Ohlone territory, and I want to thank the Ohlone representatives for allowing me to be on the territory and share this knowledge. I'm a guest here, and I appreciate the tribal community at Segorte Land Trust for hosting us last night and speaking with us and having community with them. My name is Ali Menders Knight. I'm a Mechoopda tribal member. I'm also Nomalaki, Kankau, and Wintu of Northern California. And I'm a TEK practitioner, and I started basket weaving in about 1998. And in 1998, I started to learn about the ecosystems around me more and more, and how to gather basket materials. And once I started gathering basket materials, I started working with the community outreach on my gathering places so they would not be harmed. And that extended into outdoor education for youth, called Kids in Creeks, for many years. And then I started working a lot more with different tribal folks on traditional ecological knowledge. So I went to CIMC program in 2009 and wrote a business plan for traditional ecological knowledge, workforce development for climate change adaptation. And so I've been working on that since 2009, and now I am the executive director of California Open Lands. I recently received an honorary degree from Syracuse, New York, as a doctorate degree. And I'm working and collaborating with many tribes on a Climate Smart Block Grant for nature-based solutions. And I'm working with about 10 to 12 tribes at this time in Northern California and Southern California, and a multiple amount of tribal community members from different tribes, not only in California, but throughout outside of California.
Meechon Omen Emam Natu Elizabeth Nehen Suka Menel. Hello, everyone. I echo Ali's praise of the Ohlone people, and being here on such a beautiful land is really something that I'm going to hold forever. I've actually never spent any time up here in Berkeley. I haven't, just in the last couple of years, I've been coming to conferences more and more, and just being absolutely floored by the beautiful lands and learning from the people that have been here forever and ever, and who we all need to learn from. So I'm here with the Native American Land Conservancy. We are a tribal-led, tribal-established nonprofit that started in 1998. Probably one of the first in the nation, I'm hoping, but it's been a real journey for me. I've been here for 2 years as the Education and Stewardship Program Manager. So it's my job to reconnect Native people with their homelands, as well as to educate non-Native people about who is related to this land and what you can learn from them. So over the last 27 years, we've actually preserved 5,000 acres of land in different places. We have 6, soon to be 7 preserves within California, and we steward them alongside the people who are related to those lands. So it's really important work and humbling work and incredible diplomatic work as well. We also work with very wonderful state and partners to do this work as well. We actually, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I had this all rehearsing in my head over and over before I got here. But we were actually very instrumental in getting the Cahuilla National Monument. Yes, we saw that being declared in January. And yes, we know that there's some kind of a little fear about that, but we're still here and we stand strong, and we will always be here protecting our lands with our community. Another big part of my job is literally just educating non-Native people and working with public agencies to do work on land that is not necessarily under like reservation or protected. So we actually identify those areas of sacred spaces that need to be protected and actively buy them back or getting land back. So, thank you.
I also have my own microphone. Aiki Kawuda Nanipoi Asia Conrad. My name is Asia Conrad. I'm a Karuk tribal member from far northern California on the Klamath River. And yes, there is still 7 hours north of here. I did my undergrad here at Berkeley, so I had to get good at explaining just how far north we are. So our territory actually also extends into southern Oregon. So hopefully some of you were around and got to hear Amy Cordalis, some folks that spoke to the amazing work that's happening up on the Klamath, the 4 hydroelectric dams that just came out. So yeah, that's super exciting. And so just a little bit about me, I guess, since we're just still in intros here. Let's see, I was born and raised near my ancestral village of Katamine, which is at the base of a mountain called Auich, which is the center of the Karuk world. And we are known as Fix the World People, or Heal the World People. And that's just has to do with our Pikyawish world renewal ceremonies. So a lot of the work that we do and the way that I was brought up was just kind of with a worldview that's very much oriented around maintaining a harmonious relationship with the earth and just maintaining balance. And so that's kind of like where I'm coming from in my work. I was raised by my maternal grandparents that also come from that place. And so my grandpa was actually born, Karuk was his first language. He was born in a traditional bark house there at Katamine, which was later burned by the Forest Service at the time that, they were coming in and extracting all the resources, gold mining, all this. But my grandpa was, and my grandmother were were probably the most influential kind of folks in raising me. I called my grandpa mommy till I was like 4. I lived with them. We were really close, really tight. And at the age of 5, he was taken and put into a boarding school at Chemawa, Oregon. So just kind of severed that relationship to place. He literally had language beaten out of him. And so there's a lot of stories kind of around like that history that really kind of contextualizes my work. But that said, he was just an incredibly resilient and just smart person, and just his worldview, and just despite everything that he had been through, he always, encouraged me to do well in school and to go get an education. Nobody in my family had gone to college. I come from a small rural community. I think that everyone in my hometown could probably not even fill all the seats in this room. So really, really small, isolated place, but he was still able to take, all this that had happened to him and happened to our people at this time, and just really always told me, like, baby girl, you got to go out and you got to get an education. You got to be able to come back and, stand up for our people in this place and our relatives. And so, that was just kind of like, I don't know, it just was like, it shaped my perspective on education. And that's the field that I work in now. I'm the Pikya Field Institute program manager. And again, Pikya means to fix. So our environmental education program is very much centered and deeply rooted in kind of just fixing the world and maintaining and honoring our responsibility to place. And so, as first generation college student, I made it here to UC Berkeley, first in my community. Thank you. I graduated from a high school. It was an hour drive up the river, up the Klamath River. I graduated in a class of 12 students. I was the only one in my grade, kindergarten through 8th grade, but we're here doing it. Shout out to Ruby Kings on the home stretch. We got one more from our village there that's like finishing up here. And so, I think that there's just like a powerful, there's a lot I can say. A lot of the work that we're doing up there, we're really known for our work around restoring traditional burning practices. I also have a background in wildland firefighting. Grew up burning with my grandpa, so and he always just called it cleaning up the yard. Jordan and I talk about this. We run in the same circle of Indigenous Peoples Burning Network and those places and spaces. But I also worked on a hell attack crew for the U.S. Forest Service, and as also just shout out to my gramps. He was always like, "There's nothing a white man could build that an Indian can't figure out." And so he worked on small engines, but I also kind of apply that to these Western systems and the power dynamics and everything at play. So just navigating the institutional academia, navigating the incident command system and fire suppression model, all these different things. And I just, I think it's just a testament to Indigenous people and we could do it, and we could even do it better, and we can figure out how we can work with people that, I don't know. I think I'm getting too ahead of myself. Give me a microphone and I'll yap all day, guys. It's where I come from. So I'm gonna actually just stop there and let Jordan introduce himself, and then we'll hopefully come back to some of this.
Ameni ka laktak tulenkiti kani ka saka uliomi kohoika oloni yomi. Good day. My name is Jordan Reyes. I'm a Middletown Rancheria tribal member, and I'm the field coordinator with the Tribal EcoRestoration Alliance. And I also gave thanks to the Ohlone Home for allowing us to have this space, to have these good conversations. But the Tribal EcoRestoration Alliance is an intertribal nonprofit based out of Lake County, out of Upper Lake, and we work in revitalizing a lot of our ecosystems to their native ecology. We do a lot of training, we do a lot of land stewardship work, but we're also doing a lot of cultural revitalization by implementing those practices that we once had from the First Nations into our work. So as we're going into projects, being a nonprofit, we're able to go on tribal trust lands, tribal fee lands, we're going to federal lands, we're able to go on state lands and even private landowners. We work a lot with training, but not only that, just healing our lands and each other. So a lot of what we do, while it can be cultural fire, there are other contemporary means to heal our lands. And we have an intertribal hand crew comprised of tribal members from Lake County, Sonoma County, and Mendocino County. And we have a lot of common grounds with each other, and it makes for a really strong crew. We have a really different way of looking at things, from the way we enter a project and see what the land needs to what each other needs. We are able to have these conversations around culture and practices in a safe space with each other as we work closely together, and it builds a stronger community amongst ourselves. We formed out of 2019 from a lot of these wildfires, and it was a lot of, what is causing all of these? How could we try and heal these lands? And a lot of these people came together, some of them from Forest Service, some of them tribal members, some of them just community members from Lake County. And they got together, and we wanted to actually have a training program for our tribal members to kind of learn these skill sets. And it dwelled into more of, they learn these skills, but then there's this whole culture out there in the fire world where maybe they're not going to be fitted in, maybe they're not going to get the opportunities that they should. So instead, we created our own crew, and we wanted to be able to take on projects by ourselves. We operate off of grants and contracts. We work with the federal government, with the state, and working off grants and everything in between. But the real focus of our work really just isn't revitalizing the land. It's connecting our people back to the land. We've been displaced, we've been removed from our homelands, and being able to take care of them in the right way. So being able to bring them back, see through the lens of what this land needs, and really practicing our customs and traditions on the land, because that's where they came from. They didn't come from just oral traditions. They came from the land we resided on. And so being able to connect our people back to where they came from and start that revitalization through the means of land stewardship. I could go on and on too, because there's so much that we could do, because it's all exciting work, but that's like kind of us in a nutshell, at least for trying to keep time.
When Alexis put this panel together, she really did bring a powerhouse of people doing some really incredible work, from protecting over 5,000 acres of land to working with dozens of tribes to doing things like working with our knowledge base and our ancestral knowledge and our responsibilities to fix the world, to really working on what it means to heal our lands and each other, and connecting our people back to the land. It's clear that Indigenous land restoration and regenerative land management isn't simply about protecting ecosystems as something external, but it is deeply rooted in cultural ways of being. So I kind of wanted to get into that a little bit more with you all. And you can just pick up whoever wants to speak first. We're doing it like that. But can you speak to that deep relationship between traditional land management and the regenerative work that you're doing and your culture, and how your culture drives the work that you do? Anyone who wants to go.
I'd like to talk about I think it's really important to do that connection, because traditionally, TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, is not labeled. It's just a way of life on the land. And so it's a place-based science. So in order to talk to the science and separate Western science from Indigenous science, I was able to kind of use Canadian First Nations vocabulary, and they started with traditional ecological knowledge, TEK. And so in 2009, I could not Google TEK and see anything. And so I wanted to change that. And so as I worked with communities, it was really about working with practitioners who are gathering foods, fibers, and medicines that really taught me about the place-based science of each tribal territory. And each tribal territory also has, rules and taboos and reasons they do things, and seasons that they do things and they don't do things. So in order to adjust to being a guest in each territory, as you come and learn about traditional ecological knowledge, you're realizing that you're going to different science classrooms, and you're having different rooms that have different ideas about how they manage. Now, there's a lot of similarities across the board about root systems that are gathered for basketry, bulbs that are gathered for foods, fibers, and medicines, and then also seeds and how they are gathered, and then how you are going to procure all of your foods, fibers, and medicines and your product, your biomass, back into the land as a process. And so a lot of these tribal territories have very similar systems of doing those things. So as I worked forward and building this program, I really noticed that it was putting basically funding into traditional ecological knowledge was really, as I would say pretty simply, paying people to be themselves on the land, to be able to schedule their gathering regimens and to bring in students and their community to learn for them and help assist them in this process. And while they do that, they get to learn. And so building it's hard. You're walking in two different worlds where you're native on one end, but then, you have to write proposals and write budgets and then talk to people about how to get funding in and how long-term those funding and how short-term those fundings are. So at the end of the day, most of the time people are out there doing it for free, and there's extra money laying around that you can pay them to put them, money in their pockets. So that's really just the simple way it started. But as we went further, I started doing educations and outreach to other communities and other programs. A lot of nonprofits picked up this idea. A lot of nonprofits were like, I'm going to start a nonprofit, building eco teams and building, tribal teams. But we haven't really all partnered up yet to find out, how do we address place-based science without appropriating from each other? We've had colonial appropriations and exploitations day in and day out, but we also take on the characteristics of our oppressors very easily when we walk into these rooms and when we walk into other people's territories. And so I hope on this panel, we can talk about respecting TEK intellectual property and respecting the intellectual property of each TEK practitioner within their tribal territory and giving power to their voice. Let them take their power back. This is a crisis right now in the climate change, and it is a goofball running everything. I'm not talking about Bill Gibbons either. I'm talking about somebody else. So I think it's really important to stay in alliance with folks that are striving to be stewards in their tribal territory and to give them the ultimate respect of intellectual property. And if you are going to borrow their ideas, if you are going to take from their designs of how they do things, you need to collaborate and partner with them and give them their kudos. This is not a steal your show type of program. So we are really collaborating on how to make true partnerships and true meetings, not a parental relationship where some folks will come in and say, teach me all your ways and I'll hire you. Thank you.
I can take a stab at following that. So just thinking about traditional ecological knowledge, I came into this world or this realm not even a decade ago. It was probably 2016 when, it was 2016 when I felt motivated, along with so many other people. We're in the same situation where we feel we need to be the change. We need to come out from this little box that we put ourselves in. In my case, it was, I wasn't in conservation. I wasn't out in the environment for 20 years. I had spent time in offices and working these menial jobs and thinking that I wasn't ever going to be more than that. But it really brought forward that we need to change the world now. So I did go back to college, and when I found that they were talking about the same environmental leaders, quoting to me John Muir and things like that, I was like, it's still like this. It is still like this. Why? And thinking about TEK, I didn't know it was TEK when my grandmother was talking about cactus buds and how we use those for food and helping her poach them from wind farms that have been going up in the Coachella Valley for forever. If you know the area that I'm from, which is the Coachella Valley, we have thousands and thousands of turbines that are capturing the wind through the San Gorgonio Pass. And I remember being in tow when I was very small and helping her harvest. And that's, it's just, it's not TEK, it's who we are as a people that we need to work on. And then I knew that I wanted to reconnect more and more. And as I went along, kind of throwing myself at conservation, I did a lot of volunteering at white-led orgs that it kind of sees on you a little bit, like, oh, you're Native? Like, what's this? What's that? What's this? What's that? And, I kind of had that, my grandmother in my head, just slow it down, take it as you can, the way that you understand the natural world, you translate that to people, but you have to do that on your terms as a Native woman, as a Native person, as a person of the land. So I had started doing nature walks and things like that for my community and my coworkers and things. And then that turned into being a field biologist on those very wind farms, doing an avian and bat mortality survey and being out there with those giant turbines where the oil kicks off of them and you see the environmental degradation that happens. And it was such an awakening in me that we need more of us out there. So I've kind of taken it, if I can get more Native people to infiltrate all these agencies, infiltrate all these organizations and wrestle back control over their land, that's, if I inspire somebody to do that, I've done my job. So it's been quite a ride, and it's taken us so many different places, and I'm learning. And Allie was my teacher too. I met her not even a couple of years ago, but I was like, you're where I'm beginning, like I'm very much beginning in what you're doing, what you've been doing forever. And I, it was such a wonderful, it's so nice to be sitting here with her too. So thinking about it's just who we are. It's just who we are as Native people. Each of us, I'm a desert person, and all I want to do is take care of my land and translate how important it is to that community out there to understand culturally what surrounds them. I don't know if that answered the question, but I waxed poetical. So
No, I think you did a great job. That was really, really beautiful. Okay. I just want to reiterate this one more time. TEK isn't something you said. It's just who we are, and I think that's really, really beautiful. And so I do want to give opportunities for Asia and Jordan to also answer, like, how your culture and who you are informs your work that you do for Indigenous land regenerative work.
Yeah, I just to add briefly, I mean, those are beautiful responses. I'm listening. I forget I'm on the panel. I'm supposed to also weigh in. No, those are really thought-provoking responses. And I think I kind of touched on it earlier too, is that from a Karuk perspective, it is who we are. And TEK isn't just, knowledge for knowledge's sake, something you could just take and extract and supplant somewhere else, but it's very process oriented as well. So in the work that we do as far as managing the landscape, that is ceremony as well. That's our responsibility and our right to manage the lands ourselves. And so up in our stretch of the Klamath, we have 1.2 million acres that are our ancestral lands to care for and steward. And we can't do it alone up there. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're like a lot of Indigenous communities, we're a frontline community to climate change. Wildfires are catastrophic in our area now. And, it's a fire-prone ecosystem, but it's a fire-adapted ecosystem. So we're trying to get to a point where we're, prescribing fire and having more intentional and cultural fires to help kind of combat and mitigate the catastrophic wildfires. But with that much land, it takes money. So it's not that the work and the passion isn't there in the community. That's as regenerative as it gets, because that is who we are. But as far as the resources to actually tend to and manage it, we have had to rely and build strong partnerships up in our area. So right now there's the Western Klamath Restoration Partnership, the WKRP, and that's comprised of federal, state, NGO, a bunch of different orgs, and it has just taken a lifetime of just failing forward, finding those common, issues and things that, you want to work at and work together on. And it gets uncomfortable, it gets messy, but it is like kind of this group of people that are showing up ready to do the work. And I think above all, respecting and understanding like tribal sovereignty needs to be at the front of these partnerships, not just something off on the side to think about like down the road midstream, but it needs to be up front and center at the forefront of these partnerships moving forward. So I guess just to kind of add to that, it is also something in our program, the Pikyat Field Institute, like we recognize that like our young people coming up that are going to have to continue this work are existing in multiple realities and worlds. And so that is something too that, we really try to like center and ground like Indigenous like practices, values, and everything that we do, but recognize like we need grant writers. We need people that can like manage and run programs. And so it takes all kinds of people from all walks of life. But I do feel like honoring and respecting like tribal sovereignty above all is kind of needs to lead the work. You need to recognize what it really means to be an ally to Indigenous people. And so, I'm gonna stop talking.
Thank you. Jordan?
Can I get the question again?
I feel like, these types of panels, it's like whatever it comes to you, but the original question was how does our culture, like how does your culture and your cultural practices and values inform the work that you do for regenerative land management?
For me, I guess the driving force would be the gifts left from our elders. My grandmother really loved, explaining the oaks, the landscape, the plants and the animals and their meaning to me. And I was only just a little kid, and you know how little kids are. They just want to run around and play. And, I took that time for granted. And, she was always whispering, like, you're the first generation that's, doesn't have to carry all the weight of the things that we went through. And so you should be the one to be able to bring something back. And she's like, brings part of our culture back. And that's such a broad term and a big ask to ask of a child. But as you get older, there's more to culture than singing and dancing. There's so much more. It's the land. It's us. And so the driving force was really just acknowledging that I had lost time, but I'm going to make up that time by living for her and living for my kids. And so the driving factor is just wanting to make sure that the things she shared weren't in vain. The things our elders share us aren't in vain, and they aren't taught anywhere. There's no school for any of that. There's no school for tribal council. There's no school for culture, specifically your culture. You are the experts, and our people are here, and they share it. And as long as we listen and hear it, we'll hear those messages. And then in turn, those messages are what the plants and the animals need to hear. How often do those plants and animals hear us speak our native tongue to them? When's the last time? In Lake County, there's 7 tribes around that lake. 7 different types of people, 7 different types of conversation. But those trees, those plants, those animals, those are what they've heard since time immemorial. Only for the past 200 years have they heard just English. So I like to honor those plants by recognizing what they were called. I have no words in this office building to describe all the things in here. But out in the landscape, I have words for everything. I even have words for things that don't exist anymore, because that biodiversity was lost. That touch of us being on the landscape was taken, and that disconnect. But that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. That drives me as well. Like, things can be reborn. Sure, we've lost traditional firing practices. That doesn't mean they can't come in dreams to our young folks, be whispered from the spirit world back to us. So as long as we listen and attune and learn what the land needs, they'll talk to us and they'll teach us just as much as our elders teach us. Because even though a lot of my old people are gone, an elder, Green Pierce, once told me, I always have an elder. Those oaks. Because those oaks were the same oaks that fed our people When I tend to a grandmother oak, I know she's the one that fed my great-great-grandparents. And now when I tend to oaks that are saplings, I know I'll never sit in their shade, but maybe my grandkids will. And maybe they'll enjoy the acorns again. And so I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep staying in the forest because I hardly am in the city, but I love it being out there and I love teaching. And when people come out, they should see the beauty in the land because it's the reason we're all here. We all moved here. We love the sites. We love how the land is. And some of us are from here, the First Nations, but we also have guests. And if some of our guests would like to be good neighbors and help us clean up and take care of what we call home, then they can be here with us, as long as they come in the right way. And if they see the beauty, I'm sure in their hearts they'll find the right way. But that's one of the main drivings of why I do this work. Thank you.
Whew. Way to bring that home. And also somehow you simultaneously were a perfect segue into the next question. I just kind of wanted to hit on something when you're like talking about hearing these messages, because even for me, and I come from a completely different bioregion, but my father was a hunter and a trapper. And he would take us out hunting and trapping and checking on the trap lines. And sometimes I'd just be like, Dad, what's this? Dad, what's that? Dad, what's this? And he'd always go, shh, be quiet. And I'd be like, oh, but what is this? And he'd just go, shh, just listen. And I remember being like, listen to what? And then I started to listen. And you start to remember that language that the land speaks back to us. And that's really important. As much as the land needs to hear our languages, we also need to learn how to stop and listen. And that, as you said, there's no school for our culture because it's experiential. You can't learn about Indigenous culture and then go and do it. It's an experiential experience that's passed down intergenerationally from your grandmothers, as you all said, from the people that taught you all of this. But we live in a society where we are not just Indigenous peoples alone on our lands, and we have, as you said, neighbors. And so some of this work, as a lot of you have touched on, requires a lot of support, whether those are resources or people to help us with grants or to just be those good neighbors. So I'd love to hear about how, if you can all share some of the ways that collaborators and partners fit into this work. And what are some of the good ways that people can be those good neighbors? And what are some of the challenges you experience in building collaborations to support and advance this work? Anyone can start. It doesn't have to be in an order.
All right. Thank you. You do first. Okay. All right. So partnerships and work collaborative, I mean, it's almost like the schematic you start with that really matters. So I like to look at it for foods, fibers, and medicine, and not just admin, budgeting, and field work. So it's foods, fibers, and medicine, and then admin, right? So the reason why I do that is because there's a lot of intellectual property. There's a lot of knowledge in each tribal territories on the foods that they eat, they cultivate, the fibers that they use, which is also biomass utilization, twining, cordage, things like that. And then you have your medicines, which is very strong. You know, food is medicine as well, but there are plants that are very good at healing, very good specifically for certain things. So when we're partnering up for foods, fibers, and medicine with partners, you know, it becomes blaringly obvious that we have to work on an international platform to protect our intellectual property, because actually the United States has gotten really comfortable just extracting and abusing the Indigenous people and not even being self-aware of the practices they have. So I liked working with different types of professionals. So I liked working with chefs to work on our foods, fibers, and medicines, to bring that in, and as well as cultural practitioners that know how to process the acorn. But how can we make the acorn a little fun, you know? And so that's really helpful with us and introducing a new generation of how to process and work with different materials and not just strict, but how to get those flavors in our mouths, to get those first foods back into the bellies of babies. And how can we do that? Because that is a really good goal. And then with that, we try to look at different specific workforce development skills. So rather than just saying every, tribal member who's working on TEK has to do all this indigenous, stuff, we're trying to collaborate some cross training into drone. How can we get drone pilots into our tribes? How can we get sea fallers that understand how to remove hazardous trees so that we're the ones touching the trees if we have to touch the trees? It's not a contracted, and then when we make negotiations with Caltrans and CAL FIRE and these state agencies, that we can also produce our own crews that are really culturally sensitive to our ecosystems and understand the biodiversity and what to protect. And simply put, when you work with CAL FIRE, and I've said this, recently a lot, but CAL FIRE does something very similar that institutions do. So have you ever, heard about a prisoner going into this California state prison system and they lose their name and they become a number, right? They're P18971. They're not a name, they're a number. And so when CAL FIRE goes into a landscape and thinks about fuels reduction, everything is called fuel. It's not called an oak tree. It's not called milkweed. It's not called, poppies. It's not called any of those things. They're not called by their name, even the English version. They're just called fuel, which means they're all going to be removed because they're all naughty. And so it's really, that agency is what I'm seeing as partnership is reframing their mind to kind of understand what self-awareness is on the way they're treating Indigenous people and our relatives, our plants, and calling them fuels or calling them names that they don't, clustering them up. So I hope I'm speaking to to everyone to understand that these systems of partnering, it's almost like I don't want to use the institutional frameworks for them working with Indigenous people. I want my power bike. I tell you what I want to do with this agency and how you can help support me and how you to look at this. And if you don't look at that way, then no, I don't want to collaborate with you. I don't.
That's powerful. It's all hard. She's hard to follow. Maybe I'll answer the question. No, I know. Thinking about relationships, I had gone into public lands just maybe 5 years ago, and I was a part of the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission. And part of my job was actually monitoring about 90,000 acres. And I didn't get to all of the parcels, of course, but as I went out there, started stepping onto the land more and more. And these are all areas that I knew were there. Of course, I grew up in my area in the Coachella Valley, and I knew where, the palm oases that traditionally we encouraged and different areas where there was water. Some of these conserved lands under the multi-species habitat conservation plan that the Coachella Valley was really one of the first areas that were able to adopt this agreement, where all the cities, all the municipalities would sign on to this huge plan to protect the 27 different plants and animal species that need to be protected and that are threatened, tortoise and side-blotched lizards and all these wonderful little critters. So it was my job to go out there and see these lands and, mend fences. And as I was out there, I would find my people. I would find artifacts. I would find things. And this is when I was working and being really quiet, and I'd hear something, not really hearing anything, but hearing something pulling you toward it. And there was this one time where I looked under this creosote, which is one of the most abundant shrubs in the desert. It's a very ancient medicine called in my language, Cahuilla. But I looked under, and I found this perfectly rounded pestle stone. And I picked it up, and you could feel where like the decades and decades of this grandmother working, where her thumb went, you could feel it. And the fact that it was on public land, under this huge wind turbine, I had never knew that the area that I was standing on was a village. I had never known that. And I think that's the experience that a lot of us Native people have, when we're in an urban environment, because we're kind of, I never lived on the reservation. I lived a little bit away from it in the city, kind of near my cousins in Palm Springs, and we're in a resort community like that. That's kind of wild too, that we kind of exist in this resort community. And I had never known that this place was there. So when I was recruited by the Native American Land Conservancy, I didn't want to let that area go. So we did enter a partnership, or, we got a grant from the Coachella Valley Mountains Conservancy in order to manage that area, And I've been able to bring Native people out there more and more, experiencing that Palm Oasis and bringing song, going out there and looking at the pottery sherds. I had buried that pestle stone. I walked it way to the back where no one would disturb it, and I left it there. But I think that the driving force is there's so much out there that nobody knows, or our Native community might not know anymore. And that's the thing that really drives me, is we need to reconnect to those places, and then whoever owns that land, we can approach them, and that's another thing that Native American Land Conservancy does. We want to protect those sites that don't have any protection at all, or that, somehow the culture has forgotten about it because we were removed, we were pushed away, we were pushed out of that decision-making process that would have had our caretaking all these years, and now it's an environmental detriment, and now we're being shaken, literally shaken, like, what's the answer? But that healing we need to do ourselves. We need to be out there learning again, picking up where our ancestors had, left off, but not really left off, they were pushed off, and kind of rekindling that relationship with our areas that we have. And whenever I get in front of youth and talking to youth, I'll be like, that Dutch Brothers that went in, all that little mini mall, when they were building that, they were bringing up your people. They were bringing up our people. Our land doesn't stop at that reservation line. It never did, and it never will. And you need to go out there and speak for it, because our voices are strong. Our voices are strong, and learning that knowledge is, it's irrefutable. It always will be. So I don't know if that answers.
Thank you. Asia, Jordan, either of you want to take a go?
Yeah, and the question was kind of about partnerships and working together.
What are the challenges? What are the
You
positives?
guys answered great. Yeah, positives. I mentioned a little bit about kind of like where I'm coming from, and I'm learning so much, and just like from friends and new friends and relatives, kind of about the issues and challenges that a lot of urban natives face, and there's a lot of similarities. But up where I come from, Amy was talking a little bit, Amy Cordalis, about the salmon river fish kill, and that kind of just being this gut punch moment of like, I was in grade school at the time. I was very young, but my dad was a fisheries biologist for the Karuk tribe. And I remember it just being and feeling like we had just, like a bomb had been dropped. Like something needed to happen. Like the world was just like askew. There was just photos, and just like you could smell the salmon carcasses rotting up and down the river bars for miles. And that was just kind of a really pivotal moment. That really just kind of like catapulted, like, okay, there's something going on, like what can we do now in this moment? And so that was like when something kind of clicked for me, just like that everybody had a part to play, and like, okay, we gotta all hands on deck. What needs to happen to change this, and to get things back on course and to fix the world, and so that was kind of a moment of that I really kind of tuned in on a deeper level about the work that was happening, and understanding a lot more about, like, yes, the science, like what the toxic algae blooms that are, responsible for depleting the oxygen in the rivers and all of this. But also, Elizabeth, like, that was making me think too, at the time my grandmother was on council. And so, yeah, my brain's kind of like trying to figure out how to answer this, because it's like, on the one hand, it was a time that it was just like, okay, we need to like bring everybody to the table to address this, like all the stakeholders up and down the river. And it was a time that like things were very tense, with especially like agricultural, like cattle ranchers, farmers in Siskiyou County. And so, yeah, there's like those partnerships right then and there, like I could speak to that. And then there's also kind of just like recognizing, yes, that this is the time to rally like our indigenous communities, our neighboring tribes. And so, yeah, I think that like there are things and strengths and power like that came from all different sides at many different levels. But I think reaching out to like our neighboring tribes and allies and folks that like were feeling those impacts on that deeper level, and kind of coming together to attend rallies. We were up in like Oregon all the time. And so, yeah, let me see. I'm just trying to kind of like gather my thoughts a little bit. But I think it was also a time, yeah, that we kind of, I mean, we were warring tribes up there until pretty recently. That's a real thing. Like, we don't talk about it a lot, but like, when you're competing for resources and like there's history there. So to come together and like be able to move past that, to find like where, yeah, like what are, what's more important here in this moment? How can we move forward like with our collective futures in mind, like for future generations, like what needs to happen on that level? And then so there's a lot there that could be unpacked, but I think that like for speaking to the work that's happening kind of now in the Klamath Basin, it was also this impetus for understanding, the impacts of like the riverine systems, and also like at the time with, wildfires and everything, like upslope management, and just recognizing like this is not like a linear, like one-sided issue. And so, yeah, just thinking, you know what? I'm gonna put a pin in that because I could talk all day. I'm getting there to the point, but let me gather my thoughts a little bit.
The question was like how this work needs a lot of people to get it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't just do this independently. So how do partnerships and collaborations play into this work? What are some of the positives of these relationships and partnerships and collaborations? And what are some of those challenges?
Yeah. Some of our partnerships that are actually working really good. We have a relationship with the United States Forest Service, Mendocino National Forest. They come out and actually send instructors to help teach our NWCG courses when we have them. And not only that, we had a burn on Middletown fee land that was under the state of California. And they actually are like 30 miles away from this place, and they sent a crew down to help us, a hot shot crew. They sent down to help burn some grass, but that's the kind of relationship we have with them. We're miles from the forest, and they send one of their crews on their weekend to come help us do a cultural burn. And that was one of the first times I've seen like, wow, they really came up to the table and did that. And then following that, a year later, I led a cultural burn at the same spot. We were about to turn this fee land we had into trust, and we had gotten the letter back and it was ready to be signed, but we held off on it because we knew that the BIA would not let us, and that's a relationship that will never work. Let me just say that. Moving on. Don't let me get down that one. Oh man. But anyways, we held on to that letter, and we had a burn window come up. We had no available burn boss to run it. What we did have is my tribe put me in as a cultural burn lead, and I was able to lead that burn for our people. And when I did that, some of the partnerships that came out, Mendocino National Forest sent a crew down, or not a crew, it was an engine crew. The engine crew was fully staffed with nothing but tribal members from Covelo. And then Fire Forward, a prescribed fire agency from down in Sonoma County, they sent a fire crew up as well. And those were their Native American staff that they had on. So they actually gave us their cultural practitioners for fire, being within an agency world. And to me, that was a profound statement, being some guy who's just leading a burn and having all these agencies and individuals here with a lot of wildfire experience. It was actually comforting to know that they were here to support these things. And that was something that I thought was a real victory. Some of the challenges, like we mentioned, is the BIA. So being able to do all this, having these partnerships with these federal agencies, we have to have those NWCG qualifications. And we've been burning since before the government was ever here or thought of, and yet we have to get those certs still. But we recognize we have to, so we will. The crew is working on getting that. We have some crew members who are working on getting higher quals, so that way we can bring true fire sovereignty back to our people. Not just of Lake County, but wherever we need it, because look at this huge climate disaster we're in. We need more hands on the land than ever. So being able to create those partnerships, foster understanding, and kind of change how everything is working. Something we use in our practices is we get rid of that military phonetic alphabet. Squads are not called Alpha, Charlie, Bravo, all those things. No, it's Acorn. We use traditional words like boo for Indian potatoes. All of these things. And then when the agencies come out, they use those terms. We try to refrain from using a lot of things like that. One of them, mop up. It was a term kind of used during World War II and prior. And it was meant to describe going back and killing the women and children. So we refrain from using that verbiage in our words. We tend to use a Lake Miwok word, Malik. It means to put fire to sleep, because we realize it's alive and we're putting it to bed. So changing all those dynamics, even from them, but just changing the words they use. Because even when they bring us out, they like to use some of our words too, because it's a lot easier to work with us that way. And not only agency relationships we have to cultivate, we also have to fix the relationships of, tribes to tribes. And being intertribal, a lot of us are from Lake County, and we no longer see those separating lines. We know that those borders were given to us. We didn't make those. Those were given to us. And so now we're rethinking, like, those lines where our territories meet, those aren't just borders. No, those are connecting areas to each other. Those are areas where it's better for us to stand than to just wonder if this is the right spot to be or not. So I think that kind of goes to the question.
I think that there's such a diversity of responses to this that I would just want to name, because I think that when we talk about collaborations and partnerships, it's not just about asking for someone to come and help us. It's about that reciprocal relationship. And I really loved how you drew that out, Jordan, because it's not just about how they can support our efforts, but about how when we engage in these relationships, they become reciprocal, changing the language, working with old tribes that we used to be at war with, working with municipalities to protect lands and territories, and finding those unsuspecting people to collaborate to take our projects to the next level. This is all so important, that there's really room for everyone at the table, that there is this understanding that our cultures are about how we embrace each other for those collective ways of being. Now, you guys are all a bunch of badasses doing really badass work. And I know that there's probably a lot of people in here, particularly other tribal nations, that are like, well, how do we even get started? Like, where do we even begin? And we don't have like a ton of time. I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I would love to know, like, what are some tips? Like, maybe just like try to keep it nice and quick and simple, but what are it's a good tip that you would give to other nations that want to start bringing this like land regenerative and restoration work to their community to move forward with their own projects?
Tip number 1, talk about what's really going to happen with the climate crisis. Here in California, you're going to have a mega flood. Every 200 years, California floods like no other place in the planet. So y'all haven't only been here, non-natives, for like 180 years. So guess what's coming? For sure, for sure. So I tell you guys, capitalize on your crisis, capitalize on the true nature of what's going to happen, your true place-based science, and we all collectively share that. Second, relearn your trade routes. And traditional trade routes are your way home, on your way back. Yes, those are your connections, your trade routes. Study them, know them. How do you get to this tribe without a car? Learn these things. Use your waterways as your new freeway. Understanding that climate adaptation is also about how, when this infrastructure goes down, how do we survive? Because our DNA must survive. And in order for our DNA to survive, we have to have healthy ecosystems, not good freeways and great presidents. That's not how it makes us survive. And fourth and final, go ahead and claim some territory that has not been, I go ahead and went over 17 acres and just said, let me manage that for you correctly, city. And for free. And I send all your kids to me from every school, high school and junior high, and I'll show them a thing or two. And then after 20 years, that is a culturally protected site. And then my final tip is put women in charge.
Absolutely, yes. Sovereignty. Center it, nation to nation, get stronger and identify what is suffering in your cultural landscape, because that is a tool. That's a tool that, for the monuments, there are so many species that are affected by this climate change and the effect of large scale solar and different energy conglomerates that come into that, and they want to claim the land and mine it and everything like that. So identifying what is important, what is not. Everything is important culturally about your land, but what do they relate to? Are they going to care about this flagship species? You kind of glom onto that and use that, because everybody is affected by climate change. Everybody is affected by this environmental degradation that keeps on happening because they keep investing in all this, like a boon of all this energy and we're going to make money and this is the new thing, but we're always left with the aftermath. We're always left with the devastation, like lithium. That's a big issue in my area and for my tribe. And, just keep on being a voice and strengthening people and sovereignty.
Yes. Everything you guys said. Yeah, I think that there's so many complex challenges that are ahead of us related to climate change. And there's also a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities to build partnerships and relationships with folks that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise considered allies in this moment. And for us up in Karuk country, the wildfire crisis is something that, we've been experiencing for a long time, and it's impacting kind of other communities and areas as things are changing and adjusting and shifting. So I would also echo, connect back to your place-based knowledge systems. What are those indicator species? How is climate change impacting, right down to the bumblebee and the migrating birds? What can you tell about, the upcoming impending fire season, flood season, whatever's coming? I think just having those really intricate knowledge systems and just being humble and able to, if those are sleeping dormant knowledge systems for you, just maybe reach out to other tribes that have been doing that work and just reach out and ask for, any advice or tips. And I wish I had a poem that the late BDT Brian Tripp wrote about being from the spawning grounds. Do you know BDT? Yeah. He's passed. But yeah, he was a great, wonderful person and mentor. And he has a poem. I recommend you look it up. It's, from the spawning grounds. And it's just about knowing how your water tastes. At that scale, how is the land changing? Can you, the salmon, find your way home from the smell and the taste of the water systems? And towards the end, it's, what I know is what I owe, and kind of paying it forward. And I think there's a lot of tribal communities and places that are for example, Karuk, and I know that we work with you all too. that want fire training. Like if fire is impacting your communities and you're interested in like restoring cultural burning and not just like being like responsive and reactive to wildfire, but actually being proactive, there are things like, I know you offer trainings that are open to other Indigenous folks or non-Indigenous folks and allies that just want to understand like the fire system and how fire interacts with the unique ecosystem that maybe you live in or work in. We have the Karuk Indigenous women's treks up on the Klamath too, and that's just really, really to recognize and honor that like the role of women in fire stewardship and queer and two-spirit and non-binary, like creating a space for people, a safe space. Fire is a very like militaristic, like, so I would just encourage you to reach out. I think there's a lot of people with a lot of experience and have had the fantastic failures that they'd be willing to share lessons learned. It's just a matter of reaching out and connecting in spaces like this as well too. So we're here to help and support, and we'll likewise reach out to you all because the issues we face impact all of us.
Some tips. Well, one, I think something we already all know is never forget who we are, where we come from. The meaning of our work, never forget it. But also with that, never negotiate that. No one can tell you otherwise. You are the experts in your own. So do not negotiate and stand strong and know who you are, because you do. Working together is one of the best things we could have. It's the reason there was a dense population of natives here, because we learned to effectively work together, and we can still do that. And like Asia was saying, reach out, talk to us. We love to help, because I guess that's something I didn't say about Tara is like, we do love to train people. We'll train you on NWCG standards, but we'll also add a cultural aspect. So that way it's not just you're getting the militarized version of everything. No, you're getting a human version of something. And that's really important. We lose that human touch if we start getting lost in policy work and everything. We forget who we are. But I think it's very important to maintain that. And then reinforce those relationships, mend relationships. We don't always have to carry the weight in our hearts. We can always clean and make space for each other, to hear each other, understand each other, so that way we can work effectively together. And, us at Terra, we have lake treks, and we open it to tribal members in the greater community, because it's all of our home. And a lot of non-natives that come to these events that I work with, they have that good state of mind to come in where I know they're not being extractive. They just want to learn how they could help and be allies. And that's, I think, one of the best things they could do is they want to know the proper way of doing things, but they know where the information is. It's in these First Nations, the people that were here prior. And so as long as we are respecting those lines and working together and healing each other is the most important part. Is I think we'll make our future a lot better, a lot healthier, and we'll revitalize a lot of what we think is lost.
I would love to hear a closing comment from each of you. We have 5 minutes, so that means 1 minute and 15 seconds each. However order. I'm going to go, you know what, Jordan, you're starting because you always forget the question. So just anything you want to impart to the audience before we leave. Any last remarks?
Just take what you've learned here and practice it. Take the skill sets and knowledge that you're going to learn and practice it. If you're going to learn it and don't practice it, you'll lose it. I burn on weekends now. I burn in areas where you're not supposed to, but I am allowed to. But always push for that sovereignty. Push the envelope. Keep pushing, because sooner or later something has to break. And when it does, we will be the first back on the land and healing the lands and returning everything that was lost to us back to us. Thank you.
Dang, 30 seconds even. Okay. I think that in closing, I'm just kind of trying to think about this moment that we're in right now. And I just, if you're not Native and just wondering how to be a better ally or just wondering what to do in these dark times, just think for Native people, like this isn't new. We've been living in crisis since contact. And so I think there's a lot of resilience that can be learned too from our cultures. And so I just would encourage you all not to just feel like the rush to just, rush towards solutions, because we have been in this perpetual state of reconnecting and rebuilding our worlds and our communities. And so to just be intentional and just reach out to Native people prior and informed consent, as early as possible in projects or partnerships, just reach out. And so I think this is, again, to bring up sovereignty, and how to be an ally with other Indigenous communities, recognizing we're not all federally recognized. And right now, I'm losing grants from federal agencies that do not want to fund environmental justice. So we need to assert our sovereignty. We are sovereign, independent nations now more than ever. And we have allies and friends in Indigenous communities that maybe don't have that same protection under those, federal statutes. Just figuring out how to build community around each other in this time as well too. So I guess that's thinking about.
I want to go, to what she said about being very, very protective, and that's something we are. We're very protective, and we have this ferocity about us, and we need to, instill that in ourselves still. But be open. We're cultural people. As a Cahuilla person, we're meant to share, and I do it in a protective way. And I encourage all natives. We do want to share. We are a good people. We're good people of this land, and I know that contact it exploited that fact, but I think we're in a situation now. We have the upper hand. They need us more than we need them. And sorry for my non-Native friends who are in the audience, but it is true. You need us. And I want my Native people to open their Native hearts and learn and know that we're all in this together, nation to nation, but also with our non-Native community as well, that it is important to share. And I know share with guarded, but but share, open heart, gentle heart. And yes, thank you.
My closing statement is kind of it's no mistake that you have 4 people from California on this board at Pioneers, because California was actually we had white contact about 4 grandmothers ago. So when you're on the East Coast in DC, you have 500 years of white contact, and you get over here and it's 180 years. So that's a time machine. And so with that, we also are the largest GDP. We give to the whole nation, if not to the whole world, agricultural food and everything. So all of the floods that have happened over that 2-year cycle, all of that, sediment that comes off of all these watersheds actually have settled in these valleys where you're growing all your food for the whole world in the United States. So we are the ones. And everybody is learning that. So what I think is important is that when we go through another crisis, California is still going to be on the map, but it's the Indigenous people that you're going to be looking at for survival for our foods, fibers, and medicines, and understand, because your monocropped agricultural fields have no chance of surviving climate adaptation. None. And so with that, take California's agricultural culture that we have seen and saying, no, that is not a traditional method of land management. That is not land tending. That is definitely extortion. That is total extraction of our soil minerals and everything. So when this land resets itself the next 30 years and brings all that silt down, it's going to take out every bit of California's infrastructure. And there is planned, the federal government knows we're looking at millions of people dying in California in this process. So please talk to your Native neighbors and see how we can work together to create an adaptive plan that our DNA can continue on this planet in a healthy way. Thank you.
Give a hand for this incredible panel of local California tribal leaders. Thank you, Masicho, everybody.
Takin.